Yep.
Am I on?
You're on.
I'm live now?
Yep.
Okay, here we go. This is my week 7 report, my Excel report. I'll be starting with the half-lives of medications. We started them, John Tinney. I'm in Miss Benji's quantitative literacy class, and we're starting out with this on this this portion of it, I guess, or this third of what we're doing. And one of the things Miss Benji asked me to do was talk about some of the drugs that I encounter in my job, you know, as a cop, you know, as what I do. I'm a drug recognition expert, and I've been trained on, there's 7 categories of drugs, and we deal with people taking every kind of thing you can imagine, whether it be from alcohol, which is the most commonly used and abused drug. Nobody thinks of alcohol as a drug, but it is. It's the most commonly used CNS depressant. But we go to Xanaxes, which I'm going to get to in a few minutes. People use clonazepam. They use opiate-based type drugs. They use hydrocodone, oxycodone, those type of things. Somas, we have people using muscle relaxers and everything else. And it's just, doing this part of the class was kind of interesting to me. So, because I use, there's a couple of the drugs here that I use. I use ibuprofen day in, day out. And I mean, I kind of call it WD-40 for me, because I'm always taking ibuprofen for a sore joint or a sore knee or headache or whatever else it might have, whatever ailment I might have. But when we went through and we done all these equations, it was kind of interesting on that. And I even called Miss Benzie about, you know, how that this thing changes out. You know, over here I've got a line with a little trend line behind it, and it has an equation of y equals 800e minus 0.365x. And when you start breaking all that down, that's how you get your half-life of ibuprofen, the times it went. You know, when an hour goes by or 3.8 hours go by, how much ibuprofen might still be inside you. I usually take anywhere from 400 to 800 milligrams. And so it was kind of interesting to me how that much ibuprofen is still in you. It's hard on your liver, hard on your kidneys, but it still helps take care of pain, and it makes it, you know, we can tolerate life. If you come down here to the half-life of a prazolam or Xanax, you know, it talks about, you know, how that every hour you got 5.5 grams when you first take it, then, you know, you get or milligrams, then you take, you know, break that in half. 12 and a half hours later, you still have so much prazolam in your system. Me, as a drug recognition expert, what I usually deal with someone is after they've been arrested for DWI drugs. They've either passed out at the wheel. We had one last night where the woman drove through the bushes at a oak line out there in a parking lot, and she ran over a big sprinkler system. So it was interesting to me that she admitted to using the clonazepam, and she also had marijuana on board. She had that, and she didn't have any alcohol on board. We checked her for alcohol, and she blew all zeros on the PBT and also on the BAC machine at the jail. So it was kind of interesting, you know, how her state of mind was. She passed out and drove through the bushes. I mean, she had left Oaklawn, drove out on Central kind of south, and then she made a turn back into the south parking lot and drove right through the sprinkler system head that they have out there. And then, you know, she ran into the bushes and tore up her car. And then she backed out of that. She drove back into the parking lot. And this whole time she's just in a daze. And we find her passed out in her vehicle. So, anyway, she ended up going with us with bracelets on towards the jail. The next one I have is a half-life of metoprolol. I take that as far as blood pressure medicine. I call it my anti-explosion medicine. I've been taking it for years. Way back when Dr. Queen was still living, I was prescribed it, and I've been taking it for a long, long time. And I take it morning and night. You know, every day I take a pill. It's a time release thing, and it has worked well for me and kept me from exploding, because I kind of get a little wound up about things. And the last thing is the half-life of marijuana. Marijuana, how it works in your body. It talked about, you know, when we usually have people what we call well, I'm not going to use the word recall, but we have them provide a urine sample if they will. When they provide that urine sample, it goes to the crime lab. The crime lab says they do have it in their system or they don't. They don't give us a quantitative measure of how many nanograms is in their metabolites of their system. They just tell us they test positive for marijuana or they don't. But if you look at the way this breaks down in my graph and everything else, marijuana, the first half-life it has is at 30 hours. And so it's in your system for quite some time. It'll be there. The graph and the chart I have here show that it goes up to 300 hours. Which that's quite a long time. 240 hours, that's 10 days. So I mean, it stays in your system usually a month. And if they do a follicle hair test, I guess it will stay in there even longer than that. But that was mighty, interesting to me how long this marijuana does stay in your system. I'm sitting there looking at my notes here that I'm supposed to talk about, and one of the things that we talked about was the exponential part of these. It's similar to pi, that it shows how that it goes on for almost infinity. And these lines that we're talking about here, the curve, it never actually touches ground zero, so to speak. It always is just a little bit away, and it will go on and on and on and on and on. But what I thought was interesting about this, I told you already that being a drug recognition expert, it was kind of interesting to me. And we talk about the psychoactive effect of the drug. So many people do what we call polydrugging. They use alcohol, they use marijuana, they use Xanax or Soma or any of that stuff. They take all of these things together. We have a lot of people that use Subutex nowadays. The Subutex is a drug that's supposed to help you get off of morphine addiction or an opiate addiction, but still they get addicted to Subutex. And the most unusual one that I've seen is a young man was driving terrible on Ridgeway, and he had pulled into the little service station there at Ridgeway and Malvern, and they called about him because he wasn't doing, they were concerned for him. He just was staggering around, his speech was slurred, his eyes all glazed over and all this kind of stuff. And then he got in the car and drove away. And when he got in the car and drove away, I happened to be close enough where I could find him. We ended up arresting him for DWI. But what he did with his Subutex pills is he crushed them and snorted them just like you would, back in the people snort cocaine, but he would snort Subutex. And I said, oh my goodness, but anyway, this part of the class was pretty interesting to me on how these things do. You can put these formulas to any type of drug you want, and you can look all these things up and go from there. The next thing we're going to talk about is this genetically engineered and modified corn that they're talking about, and how that it has such an effect on our health as a nation. Really, we're talking about the genetically modified crops and health in America. And what I've got here is the chart showing all the data that the genetically modified corn, soy, cotton, and corn and soy from 96 to 12. And the graph that we came up with on this is, you can see the lines and everything there on each one of these. Let me get back down to my notes here and see if I can remember what I was going to talk to y'all about. Where am I at here? Okay, where's my thing? Oh my goodness, what did I do with it? Okay, here we go. What she was asking us about is the sources that we have here. And I put on here that I reckon you can trust all the sources as well as anything. Correlation means the relationship between two variables that may or seems to be related, such as genetically modified foods and health problems. When I was doing the research on this, it talked about, some of these guys, animals, were doing better when they got away from the genetically modified food and just had them they were feeding them regular type foods. Causation, the definition for it, according to Merriam-Webster, is the act or process of causing. So something to happen or exist. So when Swanson showed the correlation between GMO produced food and health issues, it was a correlation, but it was also that these GMO produced foods do cause health problems, because it's the modified foods. What I've learned just being in this class about more healthy eating from Miss Benzie is, myself, I've lost almost 20 pounds since I've been in this class, just because it's not so much that I'm not eating genetically modified foods, but I'm just eating better, and so since I'm eating better, my health, I hope to get off of metoprolol, as I talked about before. I hope to get off of my diabetes medicine. I take metformin for that. I hope to get away from all those things and get to where, I'm a lot more robust. I'm 60 years old and I want to live for a long time. And, it's something that I'm very much interested in. And it's kind of neat that I've learned about these things being in this class. I've had to make all these graphs. It's been a lot of work. It's kicked my butt, but, I've got a graph here with children with autism, and it shows how that they have the different things that were applied to corn and soy, and how it has caused such a boom in children with autism from 1990 all the way to 2010. You can see by this graph how that it's just grown and grown and grown about the number of folks that have this that didn't used to. When back in 1990, according to the data I got here, there was none. Now, in 2009, there's 375,000 cases of it. So it does make a difference. Here we're talking about the intestinal infections over the genetically modified corn. From 1990, there was hardly any. Nowadays, we have, all these people that are dying per 100,000. You got all these folks are passing because of it. In 2009, it looked like it was the highest, and it dropped a little bit in 2010. But it's it's interesting that these things, this peritonitis or tinnitus, is that it shows that it's been on the rise ever since 1990 on up. It's more than doubled since 1990. We had 140 patients with it. Now we have over 410 in 2010. Now I don't know what the data is all the way up to 2019, but these are just things that we, certainly should be aware about for our own health. This chart here shows about the way that it just skyrocketed from 2006, 2007 on. It has just climbed, and it's plumb off the charts. So it's interesting that these things have such an effect on our health. This bowel disease right here, in 1990, 130, no big deal. Now we have over 580,000 people that are diagnosed with the bowel disease. When they're discharged from the hospital. It's kind of interesting how these charts move, and whenever you put the data in here, it's neat how this thing compiles the reports for us. All right, we'll move on to number 3. This is about impaired driving. This goes back to something that's near and dear to my heart. As I told you before, I'm a drug recognition expert, and what that really means is that I'm really damn good at doing DWI. I'm proud of doing a DWI in I think it was 2011 and 2014, maybe. It was a couple of years there that I was recognized by the state. I led our department in DWI enforcement. I've got 2 nice certificates at home about that. I was honored by the state police, the director and everything over in Little Rock, had a nice write-up and everything else. It was kind of cool. And so I'm lucky. I'm an instructor in that type of thing, and I'm a standardized field sobriety instructor. I'm a drug recognition instructor. I'm an ARID instructor. we take care of anything that has to do with impaired driving. I'm all about it, and I really, really enjoy teaching it, and I also enjoy enforcing it out in the field. I don't want nobody to hurt anybody. I don't want them to hurt themselves, and I certainly don't want to hurt them to hurt my family or anybody that I care about. So it's something that is important to me. I mean, if you're going to drink, I don't care if you drink a battleship full of whiskey or beer or whatever, drink all you want. Just don't drive, or if you want to smoke weed or you want to get high on crack, as long as you don't bother me or bother somebody else and don't hop in a car and get yourself hurt or get somebody else hurt, I'm all for it. Go for it. I don't care. It doesn't make me any difference. But don't do it and try to drive or anything like that, because you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt somebody else. These charts and everything that I've come up here for you show about the fatalities per year and the averages that we've had on those. It breaks it down into the gender. The males are, of course, going to be the most. They're the ones that seem like take the most chances and everything else. Most females are not a lot of chance takers. There are some that do, but all of these graphs and everything else, interesting part of it, was how everything, let me come back here. Where did I go? I think I was on, yeah, here we go. I jumped over for some reason. These talk about the road users. We've got every kind of thing you can imagine here that has to do with impaired driving. We've got it on here. Let me find my little dialogue here, and I'll tell you about what I've got written up in this. Where did I put it? We better do yeah, here we go. According to the figures we got, doesn't look like we're learning a whole lot. In Garland County, we really, really haven't made a difference on impaired drivers. I'm a member of the DWI task force, and when I first started doing this back in, almost say probably 9 and 10, I started, really, really heavy into it. I learned, I went to the DRE program to learn how to be a DRE, went through that instruction. It's one of the toughest classes I've ever been to. And then since then, we have really, really, really cracked down on impaired drivers in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And we've got one of the highest conviction rates statewide in Garland County for DWI and DWI convictions for the arrests that we have. We make good reports. We make, we make good arrests. If somebody needs to go to jail, we certainly put them in jail. And that word has gotten around to everyone. And I'm a graveyard guy. I call myself a vampire, and you can't believe the number of cabs that are running around in town now. And of course, a lot of our 5 o'clock clubs are done now. The long shot is gone. Boot scooters is gone. We don't have those people going there as much. We still have a few, but it's really dropped dramatically here in Hot Springs. That that the drivers in Garland County know that we're out, and then by golly, if they're out driving drunk, we're going to find them and we're going to take them to jail. DWI drugs seems like the lady we arrested last night, she was on clonazepam and weed, marijuana. And if you drink a cold beer, if you drink a glass of wine or a shot of whiskey, they all have about the same alcohol content. People used to think, man, whiskey is a lot more, or wine is a lot more, but it's all about the same. The way the alcohol is in there. About 4 drinks in an hour can put a 180 to 200 pound man over the per se legal limit of 0.08. It depends on how much you eat. It depends on how your body metabolizes it. But most people, if you're drinking 4 drinks in an hour, whether it be beer, alcohol, beer, whiskey, or wine, or whatever, it's going to put you over the legal limit. You don't need to drive. They're working on getting the legal per se limit at 0.05. They're wanting to do that. They've tested it at a number of places. They've had race car drivers drive, without alcohol and put in laps around tracks and everything else. And then they've had race car drivers get up to a 0.5 level. And it shows how that their reaction time is so much worse. They can't make it through the slaloms. It's almost unbelievable. In one of these charts here, I showed that the reaction time of 2.3 seconds at a .08 is unbelievable. So if you'll think about 2.3 seconds, or 2.36 seconds, if you put that on your watch and or on your iPhone or whatever, and just hit it and wait for 2.3 seconds to go by, it seems like it's an eternity. Well, during the time 2.36 seconds go by, if you're traveling along at 60 miles an hour, you're almost going a football field before you even begin to stop or slow down. You go almost 75 yards before you even think about slowing down. Then you've got to get your foot to the brake or whatever. And it's really it's interesting that that reaction time is like that, but you've got to think about it. We've got a Venn diagram here that she had us recreate. And the Venn diagram illustrates everything really, really well. It talks about how that everything overlaps here. It has alcohol, 17.8. So that part of the Venn diagram is correct. It's the most widely abused and used CNS depressant there is. Right in behind it is cannabis. People love to smoke weed nowadays. It's getting legal everywhere. Arkansas is a legal medical marijuana state, and it won't be long, I don't think, before we're a legal recreational state. I was in Colorado last summer, and I went through a legal recreational marijuana dispensary. And man, my mind was completely blown how it was. If you look at these and everything else, it has the percentages and the number of folks that use them here, and it really does. This chart, this graph, this Venn diagram is right on the money for everything that I've studied and I've learned about. As far as polydrugging, the way that people utilize these recreational drugs and also their medicines. Most everyone that I come in contact they'll always admit to anything they have a prescription or a script for, is what they always say. I got a prescription for that, or I got a script for that, and well, that's fine. You got the script for it, but that script itself says do not operate heavy machinery. A car is heavy machinery, and people don't realize that. They don't think about, man, I'm driving a car. They think in their mind heavy machinery is going to be a tractor or a big old truck or something like that. But man, when they're driving their car, you got a 5,000, 4,000 pound missile's what you got. And the lady last night was a perfect illustration of it. She drove her missile right through a sprinkler system and bushes at Oaklawn. She caused Oaklawn over $3,500 worth of damage. This histogram kind of talks about the reaction times, of adults and everything with a BAC of .08. It's kind of a bell-shaped curve on it. We'll get to some bell-shaped curves and diagrams here in just a minute. But that histogram shows how the reaction times have such a effect on everybody. The median here is 2.4, or I told you a minute ago, 2.36, about in that area. The coefficient of variation, everything else, it hits it right on the money. I mean, what I have to deal with every day, it hits it just like it is. We'll move on from this. We can go back to it here a little bit, maybe when we get to our other part of this assignment as the week goes on. This one we're talking about, and this one, let's see, we're talking about distribution of data about texting and driving. Arkansas has what we call Paul's Law. Paul's Law is you can't text and drive. That's just one of the things we have as far as distracted driving. I mean, distracted driving means anything. I mean, you can be adjusting your radio and be distracted. You can look down at your radio to turn the knob or find another channel, and you look up and somebody's stopped in front of you. We got what I call a bumper humper. We got a rear end accident. And so it's a huge problem. Texting and driving is a huge problem. I drive around 12 hours a night watching people, and I pull over a lot of them for texting and driving because, a driver that's texting and driving is worse driving than a DWI. They drive left of center. They drive over across the fog line. They drive too slow. They have all kinds of different issues when someone is texting and driving and they're not, you need to pay attention to the road. That's what it's all about. What she had us do on this was about the means and standard deviation of the 16 to 24-year-olds. If you look at this one graph here, they're the most, the ones that have the most offenders the most, are the ones that are 16 to 24. It shows the 25 to 69-year-old people are running a kind of a distant second. And then the folks that are 70 plus, they usually don't use a phone. They just, you got your grandmas and the blue hairs, we call them, that are looking through the steering wheel instead of over the steering wheel, and they don't get any big hurry about anything. And so they don't have too much, we don't have too much problem with the older folks. She had us make these different graphs on each one of these, and there's where the curves come in. You can see the standard deviations here and the mean on all these, the coefficient of variation. You can change the axis on this, change the numbers just a little bit over here in our graph, and man, you can make this curve peak out, or you can make it flatten on out, either one on all these. So all these are pretty interesting graphs. The way that with the information we had to come in here. We're going to hear that if you don't change the vertical axis, it'll cause the data to appear skewed. In other words, if you don't start at zero, if we hadn't have started at zero on all of these, the 70-year-old would have looked just like the 26 to 69-year-olds. When we got everything on the correct numbers, we get it down there at the lower part of the chart where they don't have that. They're not as offensive as the other ones are. They've all been set, all these graphs I've got set to zero. They're all standardized. If you throw the outlier, the curves will change drastically, as well as the trend lines, and also on the box and whisker charts. The standard deviation and coefficient of variance, if changed, will either make the bell peak higher or have the bell flatten lower. So you got to kind of look at all these things as you're going along and make sure everything. I got a couple of things here that are not spelled correctly. Let's see if I can get this right. I'm glad I'm looking at this. Let's change. When you're kind of tired doing this stuff in the middle of the night, I guess you make a mistake or two. Anyway, the one reason that the teens chart might be a little higher than the older folks is you have to remember that the 16 to 24-year-olds are a whole lot more risk takers than someone gets older. Insurance for folks, I can remember when I was young that I couldn't wait till I got to 25. Once I got to 25, it seemed like my insurance dropped drastically. And the reason for that is because they know that a 16 to 25-year-old male is going to be a whole lot more of a risk taker than a 25 to 30-year-old, a 60-year-old male. I know myself, I don't take near the risk that I used to. I used to raise all kinds of cane, but I don't do it anymore. Now let's go on to part 5. This is measuring probability using normally distributed statistics and exploring skewed data. This is talking about the distribution of wealth in the United States. It was pretty interesting as far as the way these charts show. This talks about the member of the 1% has almost all of the wealth in the United States, and it's really true. Most all of us fall somewhere in the middle. I know I'm not a wealthy man by any means. There are a lot of folks that have a lot less money than me, that make a lot less than I do, and there's a lot of folks that make a whole bunch more. We got people in the world like Donald Trump, Mr. Walmart, Mr. Walton from Walmart, Mr. Gates, and all that kind of stuff. They've got more money than some small countries. And then, then you get the rest of us folks that are just trying to make a decent living, take care of our families. Those guys, I don't know how they ever have time to spend all the money they have, but anyway, these distributions of wealth, if you look at these graphs and everything, it kind of shows you. One of the things she asked us to talk about was about where our federal tax dollars go. Let me find my little box and I'll get there and I'll talk to these. Distributed wealth is completely lopsided. 1% have all the money and own just about everything. The average household is not normally distributed. The top 5%, make all the money, according to the chart. The graphs show that it's even less than that. It shows that our federal income tax dollars are spent on health care, Social Security, and defense mainly. And then there's other programs that come along with it. In Arkansas, the state income tax dollars are spent mainly on health care, education, and pensions. The others are just spent on general government, transportation, welfare, and other state expenses. That takes care of all the things for us. If we didn't have a tax system, I wouldn't have a job. I work for the government, and so Hot Spring collects sales tax. We have property taxes at Garland County, Texas, and property taxes and all that type of thing. All that stuff goes into a fund that, takes care of police, takes care of water, takes care of all these other things. And these pie charts here that we've got shows about where the percentages of federal tax dollars go. The biggest expense it shows here is for the health care for the government, for the federal government, also with Medicare, and then Social Security is right behind that. Social Security should be, I would think, a self-sufficient type issue. It shouldn't be something that is a big federal government thing, because they take all that money out of people's check. It was when I was in business for myself, we had to take 6.2%, I believe it was, in Social Security, and 1.45 or something like that, I think was for Medicaid or Medicare, and then I had to match that. So all that, though that money being taken out shouldn't even be part of the federal tax. It should go in another little fund somewhere, but it looks like it's all put into it. And but I think it should be like a self-sufficient program. Because everybody that works has to pay Social Security, or that works for the private sector. Now, I work for the Hot Spring Police Department. We have a different pension system that we put our money in instead of Social Security. But either way, you got to put something in there for your retirement. But this chart kind of, explains it pretty good. The pie chart here does. When you come down to the Arkansas state tax dollars, if you'll see, it's nearly half of all the state tax dollars that we have goes into healthcare in Arkansas. Because our population, between Medicaid and we have the our kids and things like that, all of that stuff goes towards taking care of our children and our older people is what it goes into for Arkansas. Arkansas uses a lot more for education than the federal government does. The federal government, if you look at it, their education is only 2% of the big pie that we have here. If you look at the Arkansas percentage, Arkansas has 20% that goes towards education, and I think that's good in Arkansas. We're lucky that we have the lottery stuff that helps provide, and they take a big chunk of that lottery money that goes towards the education system in Arkansas, and I think that's good because we need to take care of education in Arkansas. All right, now we're going to the part 6, and this talks about how that our did I get part 4? Yeah, I got that. I got this, and this is about the tax dollars, and then part 6 is about our federal income tax and state income taxes. This is about the filing our taxes and everything, and and it's that time of the year we all hate it. I know my wife and I was working on it the other day, and she had to leave the room. She was in there figuring things up, and she comes walking out of the room, and she does it every year. She looks at it, oh my God, we can't believe we got to pay that, or we're getting this back, or not getting this back. But these different charts here show the different tax rate that we made. Say we made $50,000 a year. It showed that we had a total deduction for 18.9% is filing head of household. With the new pay, we went up to 28.9%, went up 10% on that. And it shows that we got a $2,000 raise, but we lost almost $8,000 over the year in taxes that we paid. So the raise really, really wasn't worth it for us at all. As a matter of fact, it cost us money to get a raise. it's nice we could say, hey, I made so and so money a year, but they take it all back. The government does. Now, if you're single, it shows that you had across the board 28.9% in either the $50,000 or the $52,000 range. You paid more tax overall or less tax overall if you at the $52,000 instead of paying $20,972, you paid $19,481. So filing single, you were able to keep more money in your pocket, almost $1,500 more money, by filing single if you was a single person. For the raise would actually have paid you then. You got a little bit more money. You got a $2,000 raise, but you actually got to keep about $1,500 of it at the end of the year. If you're married, filing jointly, that's the most cost-effective, I guess, way of saying if you are married, file with your spouse, and you'll be able to have a lesser tax rate. The 18.9 is a rate that would apply for both the 50 and 52,000, and so with that, you only had to pay $11,000, 11.3 for the 50,000, 11.7 for the 52, and so you get to keep 40,000, almost 38,000 on one, and 40,000 on the other. So that's kind of interesting to me. Let's see here. Sometimes getting a raise actually costs you. Showed that the cost almost cost you $8,000. Showed that marrying, filing jointly is the best. So if I was in charge of income taxes, I would probably try to implement a flat tax rate. And I would try to have it more of a sales tax base. When I was in business for myself, I know we had to take care of all the sales taxes. I had to take care of payroll taxes. I had to take care of so many different kind of taxes. And I always told people that, man, it's in business, it seems like everything is against you. There's always some fee or tax or something that you owe. But I think if we had a flat tax, say we had a 10% tax or 12% tax on everybody, I think it would make, or 20% tax, whatever it was, whatever we have to do to get it done, it would be fair. The rich people would pay the same rate as the poor people would pay the same rate. Yeah, it might be more of a burden, but the rich person is going to be paying that 20% on, say, $1 million, billion, whatever, $1 trillion, however much money he has. The poor folks going to be paying it on, the 20, 30, 50,000 that they make, so it's going to level out. And then a sales tax that spreads the wealth, spreads it across everybody. Here in Hot Springs, we have people gripe and complain about all the sales taxes that we have, but all those sales taxes are taken up by everybody. It's, if somebody comes to our town to visit, they get the help with the tax burden, because they're coming in town. They go to Walmart, they pay a sales tax just like we do. So I think, especially with Hot Springs being a tourist town and having Oaklawn and that type of thing, I think that would help. It would be a little more fair. I think if whatever our tax rate is, everybody gets a piece of it. And I think I would eliminate the sales tax on a used car. If you bought a used car, there's no sense in having to pay a sales tax on it again. You already paid it when it was new. Somebody paid it whenever they bought that car. There's no need in the second, third, fourth, fifth person having to pay that sales tax. I think in Arkansas, anything under $4,000, you don't have to pay sales tax on a vehicle. Anything above that, you do. And that to me is ludicrous. I mean, the tax was already paid. Somebody bought a 2015 Chevrolet truck, that they spent $50,000, $60,000 on. They paid tax on that. There's no sense in, John Brown buying it, 2 or 3 years later, the guy turns it in from the lease or whatever it is, and then he's got to pay sales tax all over again. That seems like to me that's double dipping, and I don't think that's fair, but it is what it is. So anyway, I think that's the end of my Excel report. And I will try to close this graph off. I believe I've talked about everything I'm supposed to talk about. I've showed you all these graphs that I made. Hope you enjoy them. They don't look too bad. And let's see if I got anything else. I think that's the last of it. And we're signing out. All right, stop video. There we go. All right. Okay, now then, she can show me what we want to do. Cool.
I do my time is blocked, so I block like every 15 minutes. That's what I do. Oh, okay. So much fun. That's the buying all last year. Oh, that's not
Well, no, I don't. She was showing me, like, she said to do this, and then she was gonna come back.
okay. So what it is okay. So you see what you do here? 2/7.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see how this up here?
Yeah, and I got the answers down here. But this is what's confusing me, is the expected value of the probability experiment is, so do I add up all this money, 15, 3, 4, 20?
No.
Okay.
You see how this is?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's 2/7 multiplied by it's X1 multiplied by X1 or P1 or.
Okay, so it's $4 and.
No, what it is you do X1 and X1 here, X2 and X2. What you do is you multiply these, add the next one, and then you multiply these, add the next one, multiply these, add it's just a repetition.
Okay, so then I have to add all this together?
And she has it right here. It's a 2/7 multiplied by 15, which is right there. And then you add the 1/7
Okay, it's right
times
here.
2.
So.
This is round to the nearest 10.
Okay, well, I think she changed this over to fraction. And this should actually be money right here.